Welcome to the HR Uprising podcast. This podcast series explores HR hot topics and challenges through conversations with relevant experts and real-life HR, learning, and OD professionals. The HR Uprising is about learning through collaboration and evidence-based action. We want colleagues to have the confidence and skills to rise up through their organizations by delivering real, lasting business value. Now, introducing your host, chartered psychologist, experienced change agent, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach, Lucinda.
Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. And I'm really delighted to say that I've got a masterclass this week. I'm working with Lisa Carver, who is an executive coach, and she's going to do a masterclass on returners. And by returners, she's done a series of research about maternity return to work and the impact on business and the risks, I guess, to business, but also highly relevant in these times. She's also looked at this in the context of furlough returners. So we're going to expand on her research and she's going to take us through that and the takeaways to help us get more out of, to successfully bring people back, hopefully, into the workplace. Lisa, I can't do you justice, I don't think, in terms of explaining your biography and your background. Would you like to introduce yourself a bit as well?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on the show. So my name's Lisa. My name's Lisa Carver. My background is that I had always worked in the media sector within sales and leadership. I transitioned into coaching after getting my PGC in 2017 when I launched my executive coaching business. I have 3 children. And so have personally returned to work 3 times. And whilst I spend most of my time coaching leaders, I have also coached a fair amount of maternity returners and people who are returning from long-term leave. And I started to notice patterns in conversations at play groups. You sort of look around and sometimes it can feel a little like a professional graveyard. And it didn't take much to get people talking. It's a bit like somebody's birth story, for example. It doesn't take much to trigger a conversation and suddenly they open up. And I realised that a lot of people had a lot to say about returning to work and what went wrong and what could have been done better. At the same time, in parallel, I was talking to people in HR in the organisations where I was coaching about how they can support returners. And I was sort of saying, in my opinion and my experience and from the people I've coached, I think this, and this. And I started to think, well, I wish I had a piece of research which is not just my experience. This is the experience of many, and I can tell you this is what people need, and to be certain of that. So I launched a survey to essentially give those returners and those people that didn't return a platform to share their story, their anecdotes, and also to give constructive ideas. If my company had done this, and this, I would have returned. If I could have had this, if I'd realised then X, Y, and Z, then I could have gone back into my career. Or, I went back, but I feel that I should have, gone into a different area, or this should have been listened to, or if I'd known this. So I wanted to find out that information. I wanted some robust data. So I launched a survey online. I collected responses. I was promoting it on Facebook groups and Instagram and LinkedIn. And I left it open for a year. I had 1,754 people respond to the survey. A lot of those people had been on maternity leave twice or 3 times. So collectively, there were 2,730 experiences of maternity leave and return. And those figures, those figures have helped me feel extremely confident in knowing what people need when they return to work. Now, obviously, every person's situation is different, but there are definitely common themes. And whilst I've been analysing the research across the last 6 months, I've been able to kind of categorise and extract things and rank things. So hopefully I can share some of that with you today.
Definitely, because I think the headlines are quite scary, really. If you in terms of people listening to this, it's quite dramatic, the sort of things that you are hearing from people, which employers should take this very seriously. What were the headline findings?
Okay, so some of them, yeah. So for example, employees could actually retain 50% more of their returners if they improved their maternity and parental support, and we found that it was especially pivotal on that first mat leave. So if an employer can get that return to work support correct on that on the person's first experience of maternity leave, then they are most likely to stay for the duration of subsequent pregnancies. But yes, they could retain 50% more of their returners. So they're losing 50.
Were they actually losing 50% then? Is that the kind of numbers?
So I asked the question, if you left that employer within 2 years of returning from maternity leave, did you do it because of the support during your leave and return?
Right, and half of those
of them did. So it's not that half of people leave, but of the people that left, you would have saved half of them, basically.
Got you. Okay.
And the other point, and this was universal across first, second and third maternity leaves, is that 90% of people feel that their career progression was hindered after taking that period of leave.
Interesting. You can get into why there are fewer women in senior roles in that context, can't you, I guess? Which we won't go there. That's not the topic of this. So it's definitely worth us kind of focusing on this, because we're losing people that we don't need to lose them because of how we're handling them. And you said also you shared with me these really nice little coaching cards, guys, which people can get from your website. We'll give the details at the end, which are all about the emotions people experience. So that was one of your key findings, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So we really deep dived into mindset, and we did this because actually, as a leader or a HR person, understanding the journey that somebody goes on when they're on leave and return means that the way that they communicate will be appropriate and sensitive and supportive. And so we asked people, well, what does it feel like being on leave and returning to the workplace? We asked people to submit keywords. We had close to 10,000 words submitted from all of our respondents, which were boiled down to 530 different words. We've split those into 50 groups, and on those coaching cards, there's sort of like 50 clusters of words, which you can use with anyone to actually evoke and have deep conversations about any type of change and how it might make them feel. But yeah, so from those mindset words that we collected, a quarter of those words submitted surrounded anxiety. So anxiety, worry, fear, nervousness, stressed. So it's that sort of perceived threat, I suppose.
And people might be quite senior, and you go off and you see these people being very competent in quite senior roles, yet they're having these emotions. There's a lot around anxiety, potentially putting a brave face on it, I guess. So they might not have been anxious people before. It's just this experience has brought that out in them.
That's right. And I actually think we'll go into it a little bit later on maybe, but I actually think it's a lot to do with the sort of silence that happens when you go on leave. I mean, You've been spending 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, interacting with a similar group of people, building relationships, and then suddenly there's nothing, which is sort of, you are on leave. You're not supposed to be completely engaged when you're on leave. But it's a bit like, I suppose, having being in a relationship with somebody, boyfriend, girlfriend, any type of relationship with somebody, and then saying, right, we're going to have a long distance relationship for a year. And they're like, yeah, we're going to miss you so much. So much. I'm going to give you a balloon. I'm going to give you a card. I'm going to give you a present. Like, we're going to miss you so much. And then you go on leave, and suddenly it's nothing. There's no communication. And so with that void, with that silence, that's when that imposter can kind of creep in.
It's a funny one, actually, because I've got a member of staff on maternity leave, and it's actually, you don't quite know what the right amount of contact is, not to intrude. So
absolutely.
Is there a kind of recommendation?
Firstly, I think that is a discussion to have with them before they go on leave. From what I got from the data and the stories and anecdotes that I collected in the report, firstly, it's discussion to have before they go on leave, and I would suggest to them, maybe we can have a chat once a quarter, or maybe it's once a month, but it doesn't have to be 2 hours blocked out in your diary. It's a 15-minute phone call. Something like that. And also that person can also give like their personal email address to get all the company updates if they want it. That's got to be opt-in, opt-out, okay? And maybe they can get in contact with HR like the last 6 months of their leave. Actually, I wouldn't mind getting the odd newsletter through without having to go onto their work email account and also be bombarded with thousands of other emails. But what fuels those feelings of anxiety, worry, fear and nervousness is that silence. It's being dropped. So just to continue on those mindset words, there's also often a perception when people are on leave, they've had a nice break. But actually the psychological load can be quite overwhelming even when you're on leave. I mean, maternity specifically, you're often juggling a lot, feeling like you're not succeeding in your parental role, maybe struggling, feeling pressured, rushed or overwhelmed.
Not sleeping.
Yeah, absolutely. You're carrying quite a lot. And I mean, if you've been on maternity leave, there are some people, I'm sure, who have idyllic times, but there's a lot of people that are feeling quite pressured. And the other common experience, common mindset and feeling is losing your confidence. Some of the keywords people submitted was insecure, unconfident, inadequate, forgotten. And so, we always, as maternity return coaches, try to capture people's strengths and highlights before they go away on leave, because it's create a one-page document that can be revisited. What is that person famous for at work? What's their superpower in the team? Because
I like that term, the superpower. Yeah, so really kind of do it right when they're at their peak before they disappear, and then you've got it to come back to.
Because
you're still that same person.
And actually, but you lose some of your belief in it. So it's almost like writing a letter to yourself in the future, kind of thing, before you go on leave. And then the last thing, which I know loads of organisations are on top of, but it's a big thing, is just generally the mental health of the returner can take a real nosedive. Some of those words were depressed, sad, lonely, tired, failure, miserable, emotional. Yeah, I mean that's a big area that needs support. And I suppose the question is when they're back within the organisation, how can you sort of support them to identify what's going on, or encourage them to have communications outside of the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we were saying earlier, wasn't it? That's where the biggest overlap potentially is with people on furlough as well. So, okay, maternity leave is a much longer period of time, well, let's hope it is, than people are being furloughed for. But that whole sort of mental health, anxiety, supporting, lots of line managers and HR professionals are going to have to try and help people through anxieties, these sort of emotions when returning. Or while still off, I guess. And I liked your point about identifying people's superpowers. I think that also works well for people who are on furlough, to remind them that they're not out of sight, is that, this is what you're good at. You're still the team player. You're still that really positive person in the team that, one of our guys who's off is, she organises the group, so it's all going to pot the organisation of different meetings and things like that. You really miss those. But, have you got any other tips in terms of how line managers or HR can support people through these emotions, or help them?
The most important thing for people who are on any emotional journey really is to verbalize it.
Yeah.
And it may be that they don't want to verbalize it with their line manager. They may not want to verbalize it with anyone in the workplace, I think, but it's just for that person to have somebody who they talk to. And I think within the workplace, what's the responsibility for the workplace is destigmatizing mental health issues.
Yeah.
And also if you can show, have role models of people that have been on leave and gone back to it, whether for maternity or long-term sick, or even people who have been on furlough leave, who then come back and will say, actually, yeah, I felt a bit like this when I was away as well, and I found coming back really hard because of X, Y, and Z. But you've got somebody there who, if ideally in a senior position, but maybe not in a senior position, that are, and so you don't have to hide those feelings. Okay, it can be something, shine a light on it, and you can find some connectivity with other people that may also be going through it.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking it's almost like induction, isn't it? Maybe having a buddy, setting up somewhere that you've got an intern support or something like that would be quite helpful.
Absolutely.
Someone safe to talk to. Yeah,
absolutely. And I've so based from my research, I've written my report, which is called Best Practice for Supporting People on Maternity Leave. But I've now also written a report which is called Guidance for Supporting Furlough, Long-Term Leave and Returners. And there are 27 practical tips in there that organisations can adopt. And one of those things is, like the buddy system.
Oh, that's good.
So if that's possible, or as I say, role models, and also maybe it's not a line manager, it's somebody else who can kind of keep in contact with you. It might be another peer on the team that rings you and sort of says, I just thought I'm on my lunch break, I thought I'd give you a quick call and see how you're getting on, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, just make you feel connected still. So in terms of the ways in which we you've got your 27 tips. I'm wondering, do we go into some of your tips there, or do you want to talk a bit about how we should communicate effectively with people as returners?
Yeah, and actually that's the one I wanted to deep dive into really today, because I think it's absolutely key to the success of the returner is how they're treated when they're on leave. And there's a lot of people on leave or furlough at the moment. And so not just the focus isn't just all about having successful return to work meetings and buddies when you get back into the workplace. It's about how you communicate with them right now. So just to kind of, as we've sort of said, is having that open human dialogue, because what can happen is you start communicating to them, people communicating to them are very aware of the guidelines of what they can talk to them about and can't talk to them about, and how things need to be written, and all the restrictions, and the conversation becomes quite stilted. I've had people say it felt like I was on a disciplinary, but I was just on leave, but the way they were talking to me, and it's because people feel they're walking on eggshells, or there's a fine line. And I suppose it's you can try and get that open human dialogue, just human to human, because otherwise you've got that silence, and it creates a space for anxiety and nerves to fill. If you think about taking that break in your relationship, or having a long-term relationship with somebody, it doesn't mean that you can't talk anymore.
No,
because that just fuels feelings of being forgotten, or being rejected, or low morale, or feeling less valued.
And you don't want it to just be all policy driven, like you say. That I can see how it can feel really awkward, because again, people aren't quite sure how frequently to speak, and then they have to give you a whole list of stuff out of your maternity policy or whatever it is. So then that feels awkward, because it's not the way you talk normally to people.
Absolutely, yeah. And I remember I was working with someone, and she was saying that person was my boss for 9 years, like literally speaking to them all day, every day. And suddenly it's really weird. Like, he's not talking to me properly. There's the warmth has gone out of the conversation. I'm asking him some questions and he's, and I feel like he's not answering properly. And suddenly you think, like, hold on, am I as valued as I thought I was? And something that we deep dive into in the report is what are the barriers for returning to work? Like, for that returner, what is it that's stopping them feel ready? We identify 8 barriers, but just to deep dive into one of them is identity. And I think that is particularly relevant to people on furlough at the moment. That feeling of being actually potentially rejected. And so how do you appease that? And I think that's through conversation. I think that's human to human contact.
Yeah, that is really important. And I mean, certainly having a child, becoming a mother is a major identity change, isn't it? But the furlough thing I can really see, because people can feel it makes some point about the importance of their job and therefore the importance of them. But it's not, it's circumstances. It's the circumstances that have meant that particular role isn't, doesn't need to be done at the moment. If you've shut a shop, you can't be in there. It doesn't mean that job isn't absolutely critical when business is operating as usual. But it's very easy for people almost to infer it's about them as a person. The importance.
Absolutely. Well, because but as humans, we are programmed. We are kind of like a little bit negative bias, aren't we? We're sort of programmed to look out for threats, and therefore you look at you can often look at situations in with glasses on that, but basically help you conjure up feelings of not being valued or needed. I will say, every situation is different, because if you have somebody who is in a team of 6 and like 2 of them have been furloughed, you can see that they would feel rejected, not as needed as the others, disposable, forgotten, all of those feelings. Versus if you've got a third of the workforce and all of these divisions have been furloughed, because there's some comfort in numbers. Yeah.
And then generally with maternity, you are just the one person as well. Going back into it's just happening to you. So you're and it's for longer. So it's a more intense personal experience, I would have thought, in terms of the thing.
Yeah, and obviously in maternity, identity is a big thing, because actually, especially if it's first time maternity, it's like, so I was like a professional doing this, and now am I a working parent? And when I look at working parents, what does that mean to me? Have I seen some positive examples of that? Or it's sort of who am I now? And then you've been on maternity leave and you've been that doting mother one-on-one with your child, and then suddenly that's all switched again. So identity, I think, is really pivotal, and is very relevant on maternity, but also very relevant for furlough, and also people taking long-term leave for any other reason.
Definitely. Communication is the key all the way through. We don't want to have a void of communication, and in terms of helping us with our sort of sense of identity, which applies whether on maternity leave or furlough. What other things do you advise in terms of the communication during this period?
Yeah, I think digital communication also has its place, having banged on about human dialogue, but as a different layer. You could ask people to give their personal email addresses if they're up for it, and give them a choice as to either opt in or opt out of receiving updates. And let's be clear, when you're on furlough, you are not allowed to contribute to the commercial success of your organisation or provide a service, but you can still get updates on things that are happening on new customers that you've won, or like how parts of the business are breaking into new territory, or all of that information keeps your employee engaged on the journey with the rest of the team, even though they're not in the workplace. And I think it would be really important to give the employee the option to opt in or opt out of receiving that digital communication. And I say give the personal email address, because then it allows them to not get involved in the day-to-day, not to see any other emails come through. And it might be just, an email that's sent out every 2 weeks on updates from us. It doesn't have to be long or extensive. It could be half a page of, A4, just like highlights from the organisation for the last 2 weeks. But again, it's keeping that engagement if the employee wants it. So I think that would be a really good technique to use. I would also say, if you can, don't keep them in the dark for longer than needed, because there's a fair amount of time, as we've discussed, for them to ruminate and wonder and think what's going to happen. If you have a hunch or a feeling or an idea that or like say you're 60% sure that maybe there's a chance that they can come back from leave in the next month or something like that, without promising, I would communicate that to them, because actually people need to get things organised, whether that be childcare or other logistics or goodness knows what, but it's also, it gives them something else to hold on to.
So you're saying sort of, again, I suppose you can't over communicate, even if you're not entirely sure. Give them an idea of the inkling of where you think things are going. Generally, if possible, because, and I suppose that's even more important with the furlough, because actually people have got, usually with maternity leave, the individual chooses when they come back, whereas with the furlough, then we were saying earlier, the kids are probably still not going to be back at school, so there's a lot more to sort out if people are going back into a normal working pattern. Yeah,
that's right. And I just think, we're all on that roller coaster with the government, and they're saying, it may be that that we do a phased return to work, and different parts of society have different levels of social distancing. They've not promised anything. Is it? This may be a strategy we take. We're looking into that. Well, inform the employee of what journey you're on and what things you're considering. Keep that communication open. If you think about where we are now on this whole lockdown, we're having daily communication, basically, through the media as to what's being done and, when the schools might go back and when this and that might happen. And they're not promises, but you feel informed. And that's part of one of those motivational factors when you're at work, is actually feeling informed and connected and sort of on that journey with the team, rather than if you were just at home and it was like, no, sorry, you're on lockdown and we'll just communicate with you when you're allowed out.
The day before, yeah.
It's like, yeah.
So it seems like common sense, doesn't it? But it doesn't always come naturally to people, that kind of thing. So that awareness of actually keep communicating.
It's a particularly stressful time, isn't it? And it is unprecedented. And so there isn't a previous experience that we can call on. But I feel like this report, this data, I think can potentially help people with a successful return back to the workplace after any period of leave. The other thing we talked about earlier is a deep dive into those mindset words, is increasing the emotional intelligence of the line manager or HR, or that person who is making that communication with the person on leave. For them to be genuinely empathetic, understanding, receptive, listening effectively. I think if you can educate them to understand what that person might be going through, those emotions that come up when people are experiencing change, that sort of emotional journey that people go through. If the person, that line manager, has an understanding of that, and just to be a little bit sensitive. I mean, quite often when you are talking about people going back to work, you're dealing with someone that isn't emotionally at their strongest. And that's particularly relevant in maternity leave, because quite often you've got to negotiate your return to work. You put in a flex working request and you need to negotiate and, state why you think this is going to be the right thing for your job role. But actually, psychologically, you could have really low confidence at that time. So just to be mindful of what that employee is going through.
Yeah, because if you've been in the workplace carrying on and they've been on a completely different journey, and you've kind of stayed at the same level and they're coming back in, you assume, if you don't think about it, that they're going to just come back in the same way as they left off. You forget that whole sort of thing.
Yeah, but actually...
Having been on both sides of it, yeah.
Yeah, but actually when they come back, they could have a whole different script going through their head. And so, all of these points about communication should help support that returner and the journey that they go on, to make them continue to feel connected. And then my last point keys into that as well, is to support them to maintain their social network with their colleagues. Now, it may be whatever you're doing within your organisation, like a checking in and checking out call at the beginning and end of the week, whatever you're doing, you can actually involve those people on furlough in that call. Even if it's just anecdotal, everyone share something funny you've done this week, or an anecdote or something like that. You can keep that social network going, or maybe there's a separate call that happens for that. Or if you have a lot of people on furlough, they could all connect. Okay, so I mean, it's difficult. You don't want to necessarily create two tribes, but that's better than having one tribe and then everyone else feeling excluded. At least then they've kind of got that peer-to-peer, me too, or I feel a little bit like that as well. They can boost each other up. Cool. So
it's keeping it connected, and there's so many parallels between the two levels, really, aren't there, in terms of the type of leave. So we need managers and HR more than ever to be really people-oriented rather than task-oriented. I think we've had to learn to be more people-oriented in the lockdown. Had to sort of have more empathy for people's setup and kids, where it's not been possible to just compartmentalise work. And we're saying these skills, we'll need them anyway when we go back to work. But with returners, with furlough, we've got to have a nod to both furloughed and to mat leave returners. The mental state is the emotional journey that people have been on, and you don't necessarily know where they are in that emotional journey, and it's how we have that sensitivity to them, so that we can respond. And of course, the key thing is, if we don't do it well, then actually they may not come back at all. We may lose them. There may well be hordes of people who feel they were badly treated on furlough who will just go somewhere else, which provides more issues for people. And same with mat leave in terms of people leaving.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I feel because I'm probably on a lot of those forums that you're on, a lot of those HR forums, and I feel like it has been very task orientated because it's had to be. I mean, literally, different for every organisation, but it has been. Crisis management, what are we going to do? It's been very much focused on the practical task and how the process and how you do things properly and what you put in writing and all of that. So, but I think that dust is settling now, and I feel actually the focus should now be on that more human, emotional side, because otherwise, life is going to change after this anyway, and business models are going to change, but actually you want the right people on your team, so you want to retain those key players that are on furlough.
Absolutely. And the key and your point, I suppose the key is you need them to feel understood, feel valued, and be prepared as a manager. Your point about EQ, to be able to put yourself in their shoes and understand it from their perspective as to how they're feeling. Whether they will choose to explain it all to you or not, it's hard to say, but the point is you want people to be talking about talking about how they're feeling, that's going to help them the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they can't do it with HR or a line manager, if they can do it with their peers, it's something. And I think there are, I've been able to draw a fair amount of parallels between maternity and furlough, but they are actually fundamentally different because,
yes,
furlough, very easy to look at that as being rejected. It wasn't your choice. It's happened to you. So maternity is very different, and therefore what's even more important during this time, more than maternity, is letting people know that they are still valued, they are needed, that you verbalise to them what their strengths are and why you need them back, and
what their superpowers are.
Yeah,
like I think everyone should go out and find out that, team, what the superpowers of all the. I'm going to go think, what are the superpowers of each of the people in my team, and it's quite a nice angle. Well, it's a nice angle because actually that's I've got a book, plug my book on that. It was about change superhero, so I like the concept of what superpowers in that. But I think it's just so positive. What makes people special, and that will go quite a long way to make people feel valued.
Absolutely,
so that's good. So any closing, I feel that we've gone through the emotional journey of it. We know there's barriers to return, which you've identified one of them, and all of this is available in your report. We'll give links to I'll get you to explain where everything can be downloaded if people want the report, because it's quite a tome, isn't it? And we've talked about the critical importance of staying in touch, communication style, and having an understanding of people's potential mindset. So any other takeaways that you'd want to close on?
So flexible working is still very important and very relevant. Considering phased returns, we may need to do that anyway, but generally people have had a lot of upheaval to get into this furlough situation, and there will be upheaval getting out of it as well. So flex working and looking at the whole new way of working, like home, less presenteeism, everything. So flex is still very, very important and relevant to supporting a successful return. Actually,
I just made me think there. I wonder whether, sometimes when people ask for flexible working and it's turned down, say their job can't be done remotely, that's going to be blown out of the water a bit now, hasn't it?
Oh my gosh. Absolutely, it will be. But I think it's good. I think there's organisations questioning whether they need as many offices as they did before. Business models are changing. And I'm also working with another couple of people. We've got a partnership, and we are looking at ways we can support businesses that want to innovate. So I'm there as the sort of executive change coach on a sort of more one-to-one level. Then we have somebody who is an expert on taking teams through change, and then we have another person who's an expert on innovation in terms of processes and infrastructure. But because we're going to be looking at things from a different angle now. So yeah, the flex working is really still important. Having a return to work infrastructure. So this is something that people can work out now. So when people return from furlough, what's going to be the things what's the process they're going to go through? They're going to have a return to work meeting. We're then going to make sure that for the first, 3 months that there's one-to-ones or whatever you're going to put in place. There might be a return to work kit. That you send home and somebody can digest at home before they walk back into the workplace. Whatever it is, defining what that infrastructure might be, start working on that, thinking about that. Equal progression for people and development opportunities. And that's another key thing that can happen while people are on furlough is they can get involved in training, and that's a really, really powerful thing that an organisation could offer, because that really is not just words, it's actions that shows them we still really value you. We've actually set up some remote training. You don't have to do it, but it's there because actually you're still pivotal to the business and we're still investing in you. So that's really important. Coaching support, whether that be peer-to-peer with your line manager, using an external coach, or a virtual coach even, coaching support can be really powerful, just giving people time to articulate what their barriers are and where they need support, and identify their superpowers. And as we said, we also touched on role models, buddies and networks internally.
Brilliant. So lots of practical things that we can do, and so you've got more of those in terms of that. So thanks ever so much, Lisa. I think it's a really interesting topic, this. Would you be able to tell people where they could download your reports or get access to your and know more about you, and or even find your coaching change cards? I'll have to take a picture of these and put them out.
So yes, you can go to my website, which is www.carvercoaching.co.uk, and there's a resources page, so /resources, and on there you can download the best practice for managing maternity. You can also download the report relevant to this, which is guidance for supporting furlough, long-term leave and returners. There's the coaching cards, and I've also got like a return to work model which organisations can embed onto their website. So returners of any type, maybe they've taken a huge career break, can go online and sort of assess where their barriers are and create some actions to sort of start working through whatever may be holding them back.
Brilliant. Great stuff. And we'll put all of those links as ever in the show notes. So that's great. Lisa, thanks so much. Good luck with the rest of lockdown. This is going to go out on the 4th of May. We're recording this on the 24th of April. What will have happened between those points? So that's great. Thanks so much. And thanks everybody here for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast. You can access more information, including resources or links mentioned in the show, at our website, www.hruprising.com. Also, you might want to join our LinkedIn community or tweet to us at HR Uprising. We'd love to hear from you.